This morning, I want to start out by, I normally jump at the opportunity to tell stories where I embarrass myself. For whatever reason, this one takes like a little bit of an extra hurdle for me to tell you. But one of the things that we value around here is at Anthology is we don't fake it. Right? We celebrate the good, but also means that we admit the bad, right? Especially when it comes to our stories, because one of the rules is there's no perfect people allowed. And no matter what life looks like for you right now, like in your relationship, like dating, work, roommates, kids, no kids, whatever your life looks like, I think that we all know that one dumb second, right, can crack a whole room. Not too terribly long ago, this was just before we moved back this way from Ohio, my son, he grew this attachment to a balloon. And I don't know how it works in your house, but like for me, I tend to be the fun sucker when it comes to balloons. I hate balloons because they just kind of like linger, and they're always like on the floor, and so it contributes to the clutter that you have to clean up. But for whatever reason, like this day, like we let Dalton keep this balloon, and this day he became especially attached to it. And we let him keep it around, and he was carrying it around the house, he was dragging it around the house, he was holding it like it was his treasure, and then it came time for dinner. So not only do I not normally let balloons hang around the house too terribly long, we also don't do toys at the dinner table. And Dalton was really struggling with this day. He'd brought it all the way to the dinner table, but I was already sitting at the dinner table, so I had taken this balloon and I had set it off and to the side of the seat next to me, and Dalton was right here. And he continued to struggle and eat his dinner, and I was trying to explain to him, dude, all you got to do is eat your dinner, and then you can go, you can get the balloon, you can play, this would be a blast. But I mean, he is just really kicking against the goads. He is just not wanting it. And it's buddy, just eat. Now, here's the other thing, is he had also, at this point in time in his life, had really been struggling to listen to Mom. And I'm trying to do kind of my thing. I'm sitting across the table, and I'm trying to let Mom deal with it because Mom wants to get him to listen. I want him to listen and to respect his mom. And so I'm trying to find that right balance of do I jump in, do I not jump in? And I'm trying to hold off in this moment because that's what Abby, my wife, is wanting me to do. And she's trying to get him to eat. She's trying to get him to eat, and he's just fighting. He's fixated on this balloon. And finally, she gives me the look that says, hey, I need help. I'm tagging you in. And I'm like, all right, I can solve this real quick. I clear my fork, and I reach over and boom, pop the balloon right there. Now all of a sudden, it is shriek screams. Dalton is wailing, crying. His face is red, and didn't see this one coming. Now Abby's mad at me too, And she's trying really hard to hold her words in and not say something that she's going to regret. It turns out that balloon was from a buddy's birthday party 2 weeks ago, and it has been his prized possession ever since that point. Now, in that moment, I wasn't confused. I knew exactly why the room still felt broken. I immediately went to, buddy, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I went to the right words, but, not surprisingly, the room still felt broken. Because I'm sorry doesn't rewind that moment, does it? Right? Words matter, but there's a pop balloon still sitting on the table, right? The damage is still sitting there. And that moment is a perfect picture of what we're talking about today, right? Because even if they forgive you, even if you do what we've talked about over the last 2 weeks, where you say, I'm sorry, where you go to the next level and you even own it and you say, I was wrong, the damage can still be real. Right? The ownership can still be real, but the loss can still be real as well. I'm sorry can be sincere, and the trust still be popped. I was wrong can be true, and the consequences can still be sitting in the room. And if you've lived any amount of real life, you know this. Right? Some things you can't replace. Some things you can. You can't unring certain bells. You can't take back what you said. Sometimes you can't undo what you broke. You can't erase the moment someone realized, oh, I can't trust you with that. So this morning, the next level of an apology is not, hey, try harder, say it louder, mean it more. But the next level of an apology when it comes to making amends in our relationships is, hey, what does it look like to be courageous enough to actually move towards repair? Because sorry is a start, but often it's not the finish, is it? And so that's why we've called this series, Sorry Isn't Enough. In week 1, it was all about the reason we can do any of this is because God moved towards us first. And we can stop hiding and we can come into the light. And then last week was all about ownership, right? No spin, no buts in our apologies, but just taking real responsibility. And if you've missed those, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to the podcast. But today is the next step, is that even once you've owned it, what do you do about the thing that you broke? Because a real apology doesn't just ask, can we stop talking about this? A real apology asks, what would it look like for me to make this right? Is there something I can do to make this up to you? And I can feel the pushback. Kirst, you don't know how deep this goes. Like, what if I can't fix it? What if this was years ago? Do I revisit it? What if it isn't safe to go back? We're going to talk about those things a little bit today and a lot next week. Because making it right isn't always simple. It isn't always possible in the cleanest ways. And it doesn't always mean closeness. But just because those things are difficult doesn't mean we don't step into trying to do it. Right? When you've done real harm, love doesn't just say words. Love takes responsibility for impact. And love is willing to do what it can to repair what it broke. And so today we're jumping into a stories in our Bible that's found in Luke 19. The words will be on the screen so you can follow along, or you can open up your Bibles there. And what we're going to see is we're going to see a man that does more than just feel bad. Right? He doesn't just say the right words, but he takes real steps to try and make it right. And so when we jump into Luke 19, we're going to meet a guy named Zacchaeus. And sometimes when we read the Bible, I think it is really easy for us to read it like a textbook, right? Like ideas and thoughts and commands, what to do, what not to do. Or we see them as fairy tales, right? If you grew up with anybody, like if you grew up in church, or maybe you've seen kids that go to church, oftentimes they learn a song about this. It goes, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, which I'm not really sure we can say wee little man anymore. But then it ends with Jesus going, it kind of comes this little like shuffle where it's like Jesus like, I'm going to your house today, like that, you know? And sometimes, like, that's great because it helps us remember and memorize those stories as kids, but sometimes what that can do is it can make us emphasize the stories. And we don't see that these are real people experiencing real events with real emotions and real backstories that they carry into it. And all of this is packed into these few moments, into this story. Right? And one of the things that's an important context where we're jumping into is Zacchaeus is a tax collector. And why that's significant is that's more than just some guy with a job that we don't like. Tax collectors at this point in time, they were known for taking extra. Basically, they would game the system to skim off the top from their own people. So while everybody else is struggling to make ends meet, he's living comfortably because he has sold his own people out. And so when Zacchaeus steps onto the scene, we're not supposed to think, oh, like a cute little guy. Like, we're supposed to think, like, this dude has done real damage. This dude has done real damage to the people. And watch what happens when someone like that meets Jesus. Starts in verse 1 of Luke 19, and it reads like this. Jesus entered Jericho, and he made his way through the town. There was there a man named Zacchaeus, and he was the chief tax collector in the region. And he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass by that way. And when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and he called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and he took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. Now, before we read the rest of the story, there's a couple things that I want to highlight as we get into the next part. And the first is this. This book was written by a guy named Luke. Now, Luke was actually a doctor at this time. And Luke was commissioned by a guy named Theophilus. Okay, now this is all like history book stuff, to investigate Jesus and write thoroughly about him, and what actually happened in Jesus' life, and report on it. Okay? And Luke wants us to know several things about this. That's why so many details are often included in Luke's telling of Jesus' life. And the first thing is, Luke wants us to notice who Zacchaeus, or what Zacchaeus is, that he is a chief tax collector, meaning very rich. He did not get there by accident. He got rich because he gamed his own people. He knows how to work the system. The second thing that Luke wants us to notice is what Zacchaeus does. He wants us to see that he wants to see Jesus so bad. Zacchaeus knows and has heard through the rumor mill enough about Jesus that Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus so bad that Zacchaeus goes and he does things grown men don't do. First, he's running. Right? Grown men typically don't run, unless they're in athletic wear. I mean, think about it. You go downtown and someone goes across the crosswalk. If they want to be kind, what do? The hurry shuffle, right? You know, if a grown person is full on running, what do all of us do? We go, and they're not in athletic wear, we go, what's wrong with that guy? You know? Like the running thing, he's running because he wants to see Jesus. The other thing that he does is he points out, he goes and he climbs a tree. Right? Grown men don't climb trees anymore. Side note, I think we should bring that back. It's pretty hard to stay upset at a man that just randomly scales a tree, right? I think we should bring that back. But Zacchaeus does both of those things. He wants to see Jesus so bad, and he has heard enough of the rumors and the stories of Jesus that he runs and he climbs a tree just so that he could get a glimpse. And that's what Zacchaeus does. He doesn't care what he looks like. He just wants to see Jesus. And then the third thing that happens, and Luke points this out, is Jesus calls Zacchaeus by name. Zacchaeus just desperately wants to get a glimpse of Jesus. He has heard just enough about him. He's like, I got to see this guy. Like, are the rumors true? Like, is this guy as good? And all the things that people are saying. Like, I just want to see him. And I want you to read into this. Zacchaeus is trying to see Jesus, but notice Jesus is already looking for Zacchaeus. And so if you're here this morning and you are looking and hoping and wishing that maybe there's something to this Jesus thing, I'm telling you there is. And Jesus is already looking for you. We are so glad that you're here today. And then Jesus says something in this moment that shocked the crowd. Because he looks at Zacchaeus, he calls him by name, and he says, quick, Zacchaeus, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. And I think that word must is really important. I think it really matters. Right? Because Jesus isn't saying, hey, Zacchaeus, why don't you go home, clean up your house a little bit, and then I'll come over. He's not saying, hey, Zacchaeus, why don't you get your life in order, and then maybe we'll talk about hanging out sometime. No, in that moment, Jesus is like, I am coming to your house, and I am not embarrassed to be seen by you. And Jesus' reputation has already gotten to Zacchaeus, because look at the result. Zacchaeus is full of joy. He's excited. And I think the reason why Zacchaeus welcomes him with excitement and joy is because for the very first time in a very long time, Zacchaeus is not just a label. He's not that guy. He's not the chief tax collector that's ripping everybody off. He's a person that Jesus actually wants to be with. And doesn't that hit something in all of us? Like, isn't that what we want? Somebody who, they love us, but do they like being around us? And Jesus wants to be around Zacchaeus. Now look at how the story finishes out. Verse 7 says, but then the people were displeased. Jesus says, hey, Zacchaeus, I'm coming over your house. I must be a guest in your house today. And the people in the crowd were displeased. Look what they say. He's gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner. I don't know why I always hear that, notorious sinner. They grumbled. Probably because of the grumbled word there, that's why it is. It says, meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord, stood before Jesus, and he said, I will give half of my wealth to the poor, Lord. And if I've cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. And Jesus responded, salvation has come to his home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham, referencing their history and their story. For the Son of Man, which is Jesus talking about himself, for the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. Notice the reaction of the crowd. The people were displeased. They grumbled. They label him, again, notorious sinner. We can be so awful to each other sometimes, can't we? Jesus, why are you eating with him? Jesus, why are you giving him access? Why are you treating him like he belongs and a part of this? And this is something where I want to be crystal clear about anthology. Is we are always going to be a church where people who haven't been to church for years, people who aren't sure what they believe, people with real questions, people who know they have parts of their stories that they're not proud of, can walk in and feel like, man, I can breathe here. And it's not because we want to pretend like everything is fine, but because we want you to feel like you can investigate Jesus and his people here. Like you can check this out, ask real questions, take real steps, and you don't have to jump all in immediately just to feel like you belong in the room. And listen, it's not because we don't take sin seriously. And by sin, I don't mean the church people's favorite word for other people's problems. I mean what the Bible means. Our own selfish choices where we choose our way over God's way, and it hurts people, and it damages trust. We take that very seriously. But here's the deal. We also believe Jesus takes people seriously. And Jesus doesn't ignore the mess. Jesus, even in spite of that, he moves towards the person. And so if you're here this morning and you're still figuring out what you believe, I can't say enough. I'm glad that you're here. You are not a project. You are not a threat. You are welcome here while you figure it out. And I would love nothing more than to help you get to know who Jesus is, what he teaches, and what it means for your life. And it is my experience that it will lead you to more love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness as you train to match your life to match his rhythms and teachings. And here's the deal. If you've been around church for a long time, this story is our reminder that we do not exist to protect a clean image. We exist to help people meet and connect their stories back to Jesus. Because apparently Jesus is totally willing to risk looking wrong to rescue someone who is wrong. And that is incredibly important. Now look what happens inside of Zacchaeus. So he doesn't just feel bad. He doesn't just say, my bad, does that fix the room? And he doesn't just promise to do better. He goes straight to restitution. I will give half of my wealth to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody on their taxes, I will pay back 4 times as much. That's not image management. That's not spin. That's a man saying, I did real damage, and I want to try and make that right. And notice the order. Once again, Jesus doesn't say, hey, fix everything, then you can sit with me. Jesus sits with him, and that grace produces change. And Jesus ends with the line that explains everything. The Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. And that term Son of Man comes from the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible, about a prophecy about Jesus. And so that's just Jesus' most humble way to refer to himself to the people that he's around. And so he says here, hey, look, I'm not pretending that this mess doesn't exist. I'm letting you know like that mess is real. And then the way Jesus proves that is he goes to the cross and carries the cost of our sin that we can't carry. And then 3 days later, he walks out of the grave, showing us that new life is actually on the table. And that's why grace, and that's why Jesus isn't be better. That's why Jesus is come out of hiding and let Jesus reroute your life. Grace reroutes for the better. And listen, this sermon isn't a sermon about us paying God back, right? We can't. That's why Jesus went to the cross, to carry the cost that we can't carry and to bring us out of hiding without shame. And he didn't stay dead. The resurrection means you're not trapped as that guy or that girl forever. Right? And for some of us, you're not sure what you believe, and your next step isn't fake confidence. It's to tell the truth to Jesus. Jesus, if you are real, I need help. And I'm tired of just trying to spin and manage my story. And so your move for this week, I would say, is go read Luke 19. Read those 10 verses again and again and ask Jesus, God, what are you calling me out of? Right? For others in the room, like you followed Jesus a long time, what we're talking about this morning is repentance isn't just it's not a feeling. It's a reroute. It's a move. Pick one popped balloon that you caused and take one step towards repair. Replace it, restore it, or change the system so it doesn't repeat. Right? And if you have yet to call Jesus your Lord and leader, right, baptism's on the table for you. And that's not just a church hoop. It's you saying, man, I'm done managing my image. Jesus is calling the shots in my life. It's not a test that you pass to prove you're serious. It's an invitation to take your next honest step with Jesus. And if that's you, I want you to mark the box on your connection card or come find me in the lobby and we can start talking about that. But here is where this begins to hit us. Like sometimes we want forgiveness to mean, hey, can we just move on? But when Jesus changes a person, they don't just move on. They make a move towards making it right. So we've based this series off of a book to kind of supplement the Bible called The 5 Languages of Apology. And the book here, it talks about like the different rungs. It talks about the levels of apology like rungs of a ladder. And rung 1 is regret, right? We most commonly hear it expressed with the words, I'm sorry. Rung 2 of an apology is the ownership. It's the responsibility part. And most often we hear it with the words like, I was wrong. Hey, that was me. My bad. I did that thing. And rung 3 is what we're talking about today. And the third level of that is restitution. It's the question, how can I make this right? And so here's the point that I want to lift from all of this without turning this into like a full book report. What they talk about in the book is that restitution only works if it actually lands as repair to the other person. Right? To put it simply, like we don't get to grade our own apology. Right? Because the goal isn't for you to feel like you did something. The goal isn't for us to feel like we did something. The goal is for them to experience, oh, you see that this costs me, and you're carrying some of it now. That's why some of those I'm sorry moments still feel unresolved. Right? You can own it, but the popped balloon is still laying on the table. I've never Amazoned something so fast in my life. See, a lot of us try to pay for damage with the wrong currency. And this is where we need to engage with the other person, to know who they are and how they feel loved, right? Maybe when there's damage, sometimes what we do is then to try and make it up is we bring a gift, but what they needed was more time. Right? We write a paragraph to explain how sorry you are, but what they needed was transparency and new guardrails so that it doesn't happen again. Or we'll say, my bad, but what they needed was for you to take a real step and carry some of the cost. Just to be clear, like this isn't like just modern psychology sneaking into the church. Like this is the Bible. That's what we see in Zacchaeus' story. Zacchaeus doesn't just feel bad. He restores. He repays. He asks the restitution question, what would it look like for me to make this right? So let me put some handles on it with 3 buckets that I want you to run whatever your situation through, right? Since week 1, we started thinking about one name. And we started praying like God, show me my part in this. And we've built on it each week. And then so I want you to run through these 3 buckets. The first is replace what was damaged. And this is to help us just put some handlebars on, hey, what would this look like for me to actually bring this into real life? Right? And this is simple. I broke it, so I buy it. right? Like you back your truck into your buddy's mailbox. You don't say, my bad, and keep rolling, right? You buy a post, you set it, you make it right. If I cost you money, I repay it. If I wasted your time, I try and get you some of that time back. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. The second bucket is restore what was stolen. Trust, dignity, reputation, peace. Right? Like if you ran their name down in a group text, you don't just move on, you correct it in the same thread. If I talked about you, I correct it with the people that I talked to. If I embarrassed you, I honor you out loud, in public. And then bucket number 3 is change the system so that it doesn't happen again. This one is not, I will try harder. This one's like, hey, I'm putting guardrails in place so you don't have to live on the edge wondering if this is going to happen again. I'm not going to keep alcohol in the house. I'm not going to take my phone in private with me. I'm getting help. I'm going to make a counseling appointment. I'm going to take a walk when I feel the temperature in the room rising. I'm going to do the slower, wiser thing, because the wise move is almost always the slower move. Now, quick important sidebar here. This is not a command to go get hurt again. Sometimes make it right isn't a conversation. It's a boundary, a change, or getting the right people involved as you work through it. Okay? I want to be very clear about that. But this is where Zacchaeus gets uncomfortably practical, because he doesn't just feel bad, he begins making a move to make it right. And just so we're clear, this isn't us trying to pay God back. This is what it looks like when grace reroutes a person. Because grace doesn't hide, it repairs. And so we're going to keep it simple. One crack, one step. Because most of us don't avoid restitution because we're confused. Most often I think we avoid it because it's scary. Right? You don't know how they'll respond. You don't know what they'll say. You don't know if they'll forgive us. You don't know if it's going to get emotional. You don't know how emotional it's going to get. And that fear is real. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, man, what is a story that kind of helps illustrate this moment? And I remembered a story from when I was a kid, and it's one of those moments that stuck with me because it was like so awful. And then later in life, like it showed me something that was true, and I didn't realize it. And my mom, my mom grew up on a sheep farm in southern West Virginia. And we would often take road trips, just me and her, and we would go visit this farm. And we were on a road trip, and my mom and I stopped at one of those little podunk gas stations that was just in the middle of nowhere. And while we were in there getting some snacks and stuff like that, they had one of these little plastic bins of these cheap toy dinosaurs, like only like this big, Probably like back in the day, it was probably like 10 cents, It wasn't much. But inside this, I saw this orange and yellow Brachiosaurus. Man, and I wanted that thing. And so I asked my mom, I said, hey, Mom, can I get this Brachiosaurus? And she said, no, son, you have enough toys. And so I did what every great young criminal mastermind does. I stuffed it in my pocket. We got in the truck, and I thought, we'll get 20 minutes down the road, and it'll be fine. So I pull this. We get 20 minutes down the road. I pull this Brachiosaurus out of my pocket, thinking that I had beaten the system. And without saying a single word to me, my mom whipped a U-turn. And I went, Mom, what are we doing? And she said, and I quote, Curtis, that's the kind of thing they put people in prison for. And I'm immediately panicking because it's the 90s and it's the era where cops, and so all of a sudden in my head it goes, bad boy, what's she going to do? And I think, we're going to go in here, man. And I was like, Mom, what are we doing? She's like, you're going to make this right. And I'm spiraling. I was like, Mom, are you really going to make me do this right now? And I was like, what if I lose my entire life over a dinosaur? Like I'm doing, and the theme song is getting louder in my head, and I can't do this. And my mom said something that I'll never forget. She said, you're going to do it. I'm going to go with you. And we get there, and she gets out of the car, and we walk inside, and I don't remember the attendant. It was just this, other than he was just an old man. And I told him what I did, and he took the Brachiosaurus back, and he didn't say, "It's okay, little boy," and then give me the Brachiosaurus back to me. And I don't remember anything else of that moment. And I know we don't all have great examples like this, but here's the promise that I do have. Right? Because I can remember standing there with me, steady, helping me do the next right thing. And I know we all didn't have an upbringing like that. But here's the promise that we do have, is that when God calls us to make it right, He doesn't send you alone. It's one of the reasons why we love Psalm 23 out of the Bible so much. Look at what it says in verse 4. "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid because you are close beside me." Sometimes restitution feels like walking in a dark valley. Not because you're trying to get punished, but because you're refusing to hide. And that's when I need you to remember is God came to seek and save that which is lost. And God says, "I'm close behind you. I was already looking for you." And so here's your move this week. Simple and honest. One crack, one repair. What did I cost them? What did I damage? What did I take? And then ask the courageous question, how can I make this up to you? What does it look like for me to make this right? You can't always undo it. You can't always unring the bell. But you can do the next honest thing. Start with one clean sentence. Don't overthink it. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I cost you something. What would it look like for me to make this right? And if they tell you something specific, don't argue it. See if it's something that you are willing to meet. And the answer may be no. You can do that. Because God's not asking you to be perfect, but He is asking us to be honest. And what we see from the story of Zacchaeus is it is good for us to take one real step toward repair. And as you do, you're becoming the kind of person that Jesus makes. Not someone who just says, "I'm sorry," but someone who moves towards making it right. Let's pray. God, we love you. God, this is where following you is better but not easier. God, because like you said that you came so that we could have life and experience life to the full, right? Not just save us for our sins so someday when we get to heaven, but also for right now. God, so that our relationships would be better. But God, this is where it gets scary and this is where it gets difficult. And so God, I don't know every situation that's in the room, but God, I know that we're all thinking about something. And so God, would you go ahead of us into those moments? God, would you give us wisdom on what to do and what to say in that conversation? God, and then would you give us the guts to actually follow through on stepping into trying to make it right? God, we love you. God, thank you so much for Jesus and His willingness to step into our mess to help lead us out of it. It's in your Son's holy and awesome name we pray. Amen.